of your website. When I first became aware of you was when I got a screener copy of Colonel Kill Motherfucker when I did a review for Dread Central. Back then it was Hack Movies. Long time ago. 2007?
It's been 2007. It's been almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah. So back then it was Hack Movies, and you were making films. So how did Hack Movies get started, and how did it move from film to self-publishing?
Well, my love of movies. I've been a lifelong Trauma fan, lifelong Full Moon Pictures fan, lifelong Roger Corman fan. Been a fan of John Waters movies since I was a little kid. I used back in the 80s and early 90s. I used video stores, mom and pop video stores, as my escape from bullies. And I was the fat kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. I like to draw pictures of monsters and stuff and read comic books with cool monsters. Like Spawn was one of my favorite comics, and the Max. I followed the weird, more than superheroes. Even though I was into superheroes, I was really into the weird comic book heroes and monsters. And I really related to the sympathetic, monsters as heroes or anti-heroes kind of thing. And I was real big into gore movies. Like Evil Dead 2 is still my favorite all-time movie that I saw when I was like 12. I watched a lot of Peter Jackson movies like Dead Alive and Bad Taste, and I kind of grew up with that stuff. And I always had like a crazy imagination, but I never really knew how to do anything with it except to draw pictures. And I really wanted to be a comic book artist, but as I got older, I never really got any better at drawing pictures. And as I exited high school, I got a job at a video store, a porn shop that also sold regular movies sell through. So like you could bring in your VHS movies or your CDs and stuff like that, and you could get store credits to rent porn with. That was still back in the VHS days when you had rental instead of people would buy everything.
Yeah.
So while I was working there, I really got into, quote unquote good movies, and I got into the Coen brothers, and I got into, films like The Godfather, and I really got into what's considered like really heavy cinema, and all the guys that worked there had all gone through, for some reason, the guys that this all just sort of happened. Nobody consciously did this. Like the other clerks at the store and the owner, had all had a passion for film, and some of them had gone through film school, and so I was learning about film in a way that I just sort of wasn't. If I wanted to be a comic book writer or a comic book artist, I didn't have anybody around me that was into that could show me the ins and outs of those careers. But I did have people around me that had been to film school, and people that could deconstruct and analyze film in a way that I never even knew was possible when I was a kid. And so as I've got all this swirling around in my head, and I'm watching people make short films, and I'm watching these guys that went to film school, I'm watching their short films, and it's really starting to instill a passion in me to become a filmmaker. And one night I was watching Toxic Avenger Part 4, and after the movie was over, and I loved the movie. The movie's ridiculously offensive and crazy, and it's everything I love about trash cinema. And then after the movie was over, we popped in the making of. It's called Apocalypse Soon, and it's just this insane feature-length documentary where basically one of the stars of the movie, Trent Haga, is just like holding this 200-person film crew together with like shoestring and bubble gum and hopes and dreams, and giving these speeches about indie cinema and rebel cinema and all this stuff, and people are stomping off the set and having revolts, and it's clear that Lloyd Kaufman has no idea how to fucking make a movie, and yet he's a millionaire from it, and all this stuff is swirling in my head, and it just clicks right then. I was like, that's the kind of movie I want to make. The way I always described how I made movies was that I made art from chaos, the same way Trauma does, where at the time I wasn't all that good of a writer, and I didn't have any experience or any idea what to do to make a movie, but I had a fucking video camera, and I had video editing software on my computer, so fuck it, let's make a movie. And I grabbed all my friends from high school, all the people who had always wanted to, everybody says they want to be an actor. So I told all those people to put their money where their mouth was. Okay, you always want to be an actor. I got a role for you, and Colonel Kill motherfuckers, so let's do it. And so I started making these movies, man. I started making these little no-budget, hour-long movies, and I put them out on DVD, and I would drive them around to conventions all over the country, and I found all the Dread Centrals and all the other movie review websites on the internet, and I hounded you guys with screeners. I would find your mailing address, and I would mail screeners out to everybody. I would mail dozens, and I would spend more money mailing screeners out than I spent on the budget of the movies. And I started to make a name for myself as an indie filmmaker, and that went for 7 films. I made 7 films and a bunch of short films. 7 movies I put on DVD, and then a bunch of other like short skit films and things that I used to promote the longer movies with. And I ran around for close to a decade making movies, and that was Hack Movies.
And then how did it?
That's how.
How did Hack Movies end and the writing career begin?
Well, Hack Movies ended because I spent that decade in abject poverty. And as I got older and older, and as I saw all my friends sort of grow up and start having families and have kids and start leading normal lives, because, when I started making movies, we were all still relatively young, and we all sort of, all had the same aspirations that we were going to get famous off of this shit, and we were going to make a living making these movies. And after almost 10 years and 7 movies, when we hadn't done that, I just had a really bad year. 2010, I had finally, after all those movies, I had managed to secure distribution for my film Cockhammer, and Tempe Video was going to put it out, and they were going to get it on Netflix and Amazon VOD, and this was going to launch my career, right? This was going to be my calling card, and this is what I was going to use to make bigger movies with bigger budgets. And producers were actually going to take me seriously, and distributors were actually going to put my movies out. And then I got a call from Tempe saying, yeah, Netflix rejected your movie. Not only did they reject your movie, they rejected my whole catalog this year, and they're not going to take physical DVD anymore. They're switching over to streaming, and they don't want Tempe movies anymore. So literally, I got in right at the quarter that Netflix stopped taking physical media from indie distributors, and I still went ahead and made one more movie, but I had no distribution for it. It didn't sell well. I was set to go to a convention, and the transmission went out of my car, and I had to cancel my convention appearance, and I almost lost my job. And it was right after a girlfriend had moved out and sort of left me with all the bills. And so I was just sitting in my apartment with no, I didn't think I was going to have a job the next week. I had no car. My films didn't have distribution. All the hard work that I had done had seemingly gotten me nowhere. And I felt like I was still in the same place I was, but older, way more stressed out, with nothing to show for it. I felt like I had gone nowhere as an artist in 10 years. And the thing about making a movie for $500 is you have to write the script for $500. I can't write dragons and explosions and giant group scenes of 200 extras in a movie for $500. So my movies are mostly dialogue based, and you've seen them, so it's just 2 guys sitting on a couch talking about buttholes together, and then I sort of throw together monsters, and they sort of half-ass beat the monsters up. By the end, I somehow pull all that off, but I felt really, I just felt like I was at the end. I felt like I don't want to make the type of films, because I was at a point where I was like, well, I had a friend, his name's John Lashago, and he makes the Killjoy movies for Full Moon. It's also Trent Haga. He plays Killjoy, and John makes the movies. And I sort of had the opportunity to fly to LA and work on, at that time, the latest Killjoy movie. This was like 2011 now, and I thought, I could go and I could rock that film set. And I could really show these guys that I know what I'm doing, because I made so many fucking movies for no money now. Like, I really know how to fucking run a film set. And I could try to get in with Charles Band, and I could try to be the next Full Moon guy. And I could get into LA, move to LA, and sort of try to get a job with Asylum and work on their stupid shark movies. At the time, they hadn't made Sharknado yet, but they were still making movies all the time. And I thought, I could go work on the indie movie circuit in LA, and I could really try to make this career into something bigger. And as I was sitting there on my couch with no car and no money, no girlfriend, and movies that didn't have distribution, I thought, do I really care that much about making movies? Or am I just doing it because I've never tried to do anything else? And I had one of those moments in everybody's life where you look in the mirror and you have to decide what direction you're going to take with the rest of your life. And I decided that I was going to quit. I decided I wasn't going to make movies anymore. And because I felt like I didn't care. Like, I have this opening. I had this potential opening. I could move to LA, leave my friends, leave my family, and really try to make it I was like 29 at the time. I wasn't old. I didn't have any kids. I didn't have any debt. I could have picked up and moved and really made it go for film, but I felt like I didn't have a passion for film. I felt like I had a passion for storytelling. I felt like what my real passion was just telling cool stories. So I actually went to EMT school. I enrolled in college and I started taking EMT classes to be a paramedic. And I hated that, and that was just an excuse, sort of, to make myself feel like I was doing something productive with my life, like I was going to be a big boy, I was going to be an adult and get a big boy job. But while I was in this class, I started to write fiction for the first time. I had never written a story in my life. The very first thing I ever wrote was a short film script. And so all I had ever written was scripts, and it just started seeming so sexy that I could write with no limitations, that these characters weren't going to have crappy actors attached to them, and these locations weren't going to be my basement, and these monsters weren't going to be made for $5. And because I've always been like the love I had for monster movies and stuff when I grew up, and extreme gore, low budget horror movies when I was growing up, I had the same love for fiction. I grew up with Clive Barker, his Books of Blood series. I grew up reading H.P. Lovecraft. I grew up with Poppy Z. Bright. She was a real popular, they called it splatterpunk back then in the 90s, where people wrote really violent horror books that were really gory and really sexy, had extreme sex and extreme violence. That was all going on in the fiction world at the same time it was going on. It happened a little later. There was the extreme horror movement in film in the early 90s, and it was the late 90s when the splatterpunk movement started in fiction. Well, I had grown up with all that, and I've read Stephen King my whole life, and I've always had a big collection of fiction and always enjoyed it, but I've never tried to write it. So I'm looking at my collection of books and going, I've never even tried that, and it doesn't cost me anything. I could, and again, I was like weighing, like, I could write a novel and not have to worry about budgets and locations and actors and distribution and all these crazy things that come with making movies. I could write a novel and it requires none of that. And so I tried. While I was in the EMT class, while I was training to be a paramedic, I started writing short stories, and I fell in love. I fell in love with writing fiction, and it quickly turned into writing my first novel, which is called Vampire Guts in Nuketown. And it's about a world that's ravaged by a virus that turns people into feral mutant vampire monsters that look more like werewolves than what we would consider like the traditional Dracula vampire, and so humanity's response is to send a nuke into the sky and sort of create this radioactive atmosphere that was supposed to kill all the vampires, and all it does is mutate everything instead. And so the story follows this character named Guts in this post-apocalyptic wasteland where everything, down to the vegetation, is mutated. The animals are mutated. The humans, what's left of the human population, is mutated, and the vampires are mutated as well. And so he sort of walks this wasteland fighting vampires, and I loved it, because everything I just described to you is nothing I could ever do in a movie. I could never create the vampire wasteland. Or the character Guts, who actually has control over his intestines. He actually can animate his intestines, rip his stomach open, and use his intestines to fight vampires. That's why they call him Guts.
And he's actually the main character on the cover of the book.
Yeah. On the cover of the book, that's actually the queen vampire, the one-eyed, evil-looking thing. Those are tentacles that put vampire eggs into its victims. That was my homage to anime tentacle porn.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that character is on the cover. So anyway, I fell in love with it, and I wrote, and I found Bizarro fiction, which at the time represented, I found books like, because I thought, as I was writing this stuff, I was like, is there any avenue for this in fiction. Like, I know what Spider-Punk is. I know what Clive Barker writes with the Books of Blood and the Hellbound Heart, all that stuff that he wrote, Cabal, all the cool stuff that he wrote. But that's all still like, that's just like horror movie stuff. What about the crazy shit like Trauma, John Waters movies? What about Pink Flamingos in literary form? Like, does that exist? Is there a market for that? And so I started looking up, like, I went to Amazon and I was like, cult fiction, cult movie fiction, monster movie fiction. And I found, through random searches, I found the book John Dies at the End, and by David Wong. And it is sort of everything I was looking for. It was just, it's this crazy movie or a crazy book that sort of combines Lovecraftian elements with extreme violence and all this stuff. And it was like, that's what I'm looking for. That there is an audience for that. There's one book anyway. And then on Amazon, you have the customers also bought recommendations at the bottom. And I scrolled down, and the first book in the recommendations for John Dies at the End at the time was, I forget what the book was called, but it was from an author named Carlton Mellick. And I click on his name, and he's got like 50 books to his credit. And he's young, he's my age. And he's got like 50 books on. I'm like, what the fuck? This guy's 50 books and he's my age? And the book titles are like, The Haunted Vagina, I Knocked Up Satan's Daughter, The Baby Jesus Butt Plug, Adolf in Wonderland. I'm like, this is my shit. This is like a trauma version of fiction. And this guy calls himself a Bizarro writer. And so I found, and he links off to a website called BizarroCentral.com. So I go there, and it's got a listing of like 36 Bizarro authors, and there's this whole movement of Bizarro fiction. Like I said, and I say at the time, because at the time, books like The Ass Goblins of Auschwitz and Cripple Wolf and Baby Jesus Butt Plug were coming out, but the fucking SJWs have put an end to all of that. And the fucking outrage culture has permeated everything, and fiction is just as fucked up as everything else is, as comic books are, and that shit's not being really written anymore. The really provocative, really offensive stuff. But at the time it was, and I think that stuff kind of started to fizzle out around 2009. I ran into it around 2011, kind of thought it was still contemporary, kind of thought that those people were still writing books like that. So I got all excited and jumped in head first. I'm a Bizarro writer, and I'm going to write my first Bizarro book. Blah, blah. And I was naive, and over time I just realized that I needed to do it myself, and that's when I opened my own publishing house. And again, being naive at the time, I thought that I could put together authors the same way that I put together actors. With Hack Movies, I could sit and give speeches to a room full of people and get them to go and do the most ridiculous stuff with me on film. We would put on adult diapers and pretend to eat poop. We would pretend to get fucked by monsters. We would do all these ridiculous, terrible things. And I figured I could do the same thing with authors. That if I found a bunch of like-minded crazies that would write really fucked up books and put them out together with me on a publishing house, it would be like a record label where I'm the major player on the record label, and then these other minor characters. We would put out anthologies every year where I would showcase the other authors on my name would be big on the anthology. Kevin Strange presents, and then I would have a bunch of other authors that I thought were fucked up and fucked up with the same sensibilities I am, and then we would put out longer works by them to sort of showcase. Here, read the short story in the anthology, and then go buy the longer book if you like these authors' stories, and that's how it should have worked. But authors are cunts. And that fell apart pretty quickly. Everybody that gets into the fiction world, they start their own publishing house, and usually within 2 years they close it. And I closed mine right around 2 years, and I just sort of struck off on my own, which is all I ever wanted to do to begin with. When I was sitting there having that conversation with myself in the mirror, it was never I want to publish other writers. It was I want to be a writer. I want to be a storyteller, and so I kind of got in and got out of the publishing thing really fast. But I saw the writing on the fucking wall. There was no way that was going to fucking work. Authors are just cunts. There's no other way about it. And any authors that are listening to this right now are laughing because we all know we're all cunts.
It's not to say their work. It's not to say their work isn't good. I guess there's just an attitude difference. There's just
work is great.
A clash of attitudes.
But every author thinks they're the next Stephen King. Every author thinks their next novel is their lottery ticket, and they're going to get famous off of it. And they don't give a fuck how hard you work. They don't give a fuck what you sacrifice. They don't give a fuck how much time you take away from your writing to help their writing. Their question is always, but what can you do for me next? but what can you do for me next? And they always think that next book is their meal ticket that's going to make them famous and make them a household name, and they're just ungrateful. And it's not any particular writer's fault. It's just sort of how writers are built. And I'm not naming any names because I think it's pervasive. I think it's just built into the writer's DNA. We sit in those dark rooms and we type up these worlds. We're the gods of these worlds, and we create these books, and we're the center of our own fucking universe. And that doesn't translate well when we're having conversations with our publisher, because with a publisher, we're saying, yeah, but what can you do for me next? Why isn't my book making me fans? And I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take that attitude.
It's a very Hollywood type of attitude, I would guess to say. It's not about the long game plan. It's more about I don't care what you can do for me tomorrow. What can you do for me right now?
Yeah. And that's what it is, and it grew real thin with me real quick. I'm a guy that's all about loyalty and all about paying dues. And come with me on this adventure, and we'll all prosper together over time. And nobody wanted to do that. They all wanted to climb over each other, and they all wanted to climb over me. And they were throwing me under the bus, trying to ruin my reputation to make their reputation stronger. And it got ugly really fast. And I don't want any part of that. I have no interest in being in any part of that. So like I said, I struck out on my own. I don't publish through anyone else because I will be that same cunt author. I will be that same guy going, yeah, but what can you do for me? Publishers, they're not going to do what I can do for myself. I can have a flash sale tomorrow. I can make all my books free on Amazon Kindle tomorrow if I wake up and decide I want to do that. If I work with a publisher, I can't. I can't set my own prices. I can't pick my own titles. I can't decide what time of the year a book is going to come out. Like tomorrow I start working on a Halloween story that I'm going to put out later this month, and as a special Halloween thing. And if I had a publisher, there's no way I could start something on October 5th or 6th and have it come out before Halloween. There's just no way. It just doesn't move that fast. But as a self-published author, I can decide to do that right now and it be done. And I have plans for a Christmas book. I have plans for some big sales coming next year. I can decide my releases. I can decide the covers and titles. I can decide the prices. I can decide when I'm going to have sales. I control my own inventory. It's just way better for me as an individual to self-publish than it is to wait for a publisher to do things for me. Even though I thought as a publisher I was doing really cool things for authors that other publishers weren't, it wasn't good enough. It is what it is. So that's why I put out books now. But I think
I get kind of the same thing in the journalism world. I mean, I'll bend over backwards for a lot of people, and then when I just say, hey, can we do this? Can we work on this project? To drive it. Like, well, how much am I going to be in it? Is it going to be mainly focused on me? Like, well,
right.
No, because it's kind of a group effort. I want to focus on a lot of you guys. Like, oh, well, I'm not interested. Like,
right.
It's not going to cost you anything, guy.
Well, I think again, and journalism is similar in the fact that we all sit in a room and we all write by ourselves. And I think that there's that ego has to be there in order for us to be able to do our job. Mm-hmm. And so again, I don't fault anyone for it. I'm not criticizing anyone for the attitude of what can you do for me today. It's just sort of what we all have. And I think that I think we live in a world where it's way better to be self-published or as a journalist to do it on your own, like Tim Pool does, where he just fucking goes and does his shit. And Vice will hire him, but they don't hire him, to do their stories. They hire him for his stories. Mm-hmm. And he's the center of his universe. And Hunter S. Thompson was the same way, where he would get hired by Rolling Stone, but only begrudgingly. They just because he's so.
They would not get what they actually wanted. But at the same time, what Thompson would put out through most of the 70s was gold. But then when he kind of gave into his own ego in the 80s, that's where he had that downfall.
Right. So anyway, I'm really happy. I don't, self-publishing has a bad name, has a bad reputation. You think self-publishing, you think poor editing, you think bad covers, you think writers that aren't good enough to get published through publishing house. But let me tell you, we're in a fucking artistic recession, especially in fiction, and ain't nobody making any money. Those small press publishers they're just vanity presses for, they're just self-published writers who call themselves something different and put out someone else. It's like you tell me, hey, I don't want to be self-published. Will you put out my book? And I say, yeah, no problem. I'm still doing the same thing you would do, I'm still creating the book and going through the same channels and putting it through the same publish-on-demand companies like CreateSpace and Lightning Source and Lulu. Those are the companies that you use to publish through the small press and and if you're self-published. It's the same thing. The public just doesn't. The public thinks there's this huge divide between small press publishing and self-publishing, and really it's really a sham. It's a work. It's the exact same thing. It's just one guy doing 3 or 4 authors instead of them doing themselves, but he's doing it the exact same way. I don't know if I'm explaining myself right, but basically you just sit and format a book and then you upload it through CreateSpace or Lulu or Lightning Source and it goes to Amazon. If I do that for you or you do that for you, it's the same process. It's not alchemy. I tell people this all the time. It's not fucking alchemy. I'm not turning your words into some magical thing you can't do for yourself.
Right.
And all the tools to learn how to do it right there for free on the internet.
You're just basically acting as an intermediary between them and the internet, really.
But the thing about the self-publishing printer platforms is it's not like I'm investing a bunch of money into their book.
Mm-hmm.
The way publishing on demand works is you upload files to Amazon, and Amazon prints the book when people buy it. There's no inventory. I don't have some inventory of 10,000 copies of your book that I invested $100,000 in. I have no money that I invested into you. I invested $0 into you. All I did was upload your files. That's the difference between self-publishing and small press publishing. So when I say I'm self-published, I'm not published any differently than any of the other small press authors that you would know about.
Yeah, the quality.
The only difference.
The quality of the paper, the quality of everything aside from the artwork and the actual contents of the book is going to be the same.
Yeah. Yep. So that's that, brother. That's what it's all evolved into. From 2003 when I made my first short film to 2006, I just released my latest short story collection, All the Toxic Waste from My Heart. That just came out. That's 14 stories, varying from ridiculous, like shock comedy weirdness, like a story called Slug Butts, all the way to what I think is one of the most harrowing, like just hardcore horror stories I've ever written, called The Burning River, which is about a group of cannibals that have survived the apocalypse. There's nothing to eat. People just set traps for each other and eat each other, and there's this river of toxic waste that flows through this area that these survivors are in, and there's this sort of urban legend about this toxic waste river that if you wade into the river, you sort of transcend and become an angel. And it's this group of cannibals that are trying to decide if they're going to get in this toxic wastewater, trying to decide if they believe the urban legend or not. And it's really hardcore. It's harrowing, and I think it's one of the coolest things I've ever written. Deadly serious. So I range from goofy to silly to pornographic to quiet horror to hardcore horror to Lovecraftian. I write all kinds of different stuff. The thing about a Kevin Strange story or book is you never know what you're going to get, but you know you're going to get Kevin Strange. You know you're going to get all the sensibilities that I write with. Like I said, I write from an egalitarian perspective. You're going to get strong characters of all genders, all races, all creeds, all colors, and you're going to get stuff that ranges from weird and goofy to silly to sexual to extremely graphic violence. And you just never know what ride I'm going to take you on, but you can rest assured that it's going to be a Kevin Strange ride.
What is your writing process? Either is it different from when you're writing a more lighthearted story to something more hardcore, or is it?
No, it's all exactly the same. It just depends on the mood that I'm in when I write. I write in 2 ways. I write daily, so I get up in the morning and I go downstairs. I have a writing room in my basement, and I go to the writing room and I sit at my writing desk and I try to crank out between 1,000 and 2,000 words every day. And if you follow my Snapchat, my Snapchat is Kevin the Strange, just like my website. I actually post my daily word count and stuff to my fans and followers on Snapchat. But I sit down there and I try to get some writing done, whether it be working on a short story or a novel. The process is the same. I try to get about 2,000 words done every day. And typically, if I'm working on a book, as I near the end of a book, as I near like the final third of a book, I like to rent hotel rooms. Or earlier this year, I flew to Portland to hang out with that author I told you guys about, Carlton Mellick, the first Bizarro author I found on the internet. We actually became good friends, and he invited me out to write a novel with him earlier this year. So we rented a cabin on the West Coast, on the coast of Oregon. We rented a lake or a cabin by the ocean, and he sat in one room and I sat in the other, and we marathoned books in a week. He and I both wrote for 5 days straight, and during marathons, like I said, sometimes I'll rent a hotel, sometimes I'll fly out and work with another author like that. But we didn't work on the same book. We worked on separate books, and then we would sort of meet at night and have beers and talk about where we'd gotten in the books, and we'd talk, just talk about writing. Or when it comes to me and Carlton, the place we were renting had a VCR and a bunch of videotapes of like old Van Damme movies. So we would just watch Van Damme movies on VHS at night and talk about our books, talk about where we're at in our books, and we would write all day. And we try to get 8 to 10 hours a day of writing done. And I do the same thing when I stay at hotels. I'll rent a hotel and I'll try to do 8 to 10 hours of solid writing every single day. And I can usually blast through the last third of a book in about 2 days and start another project. When I went to write with Carlton, I actually wrote a whole project from scratch, from start to finish. And it's about 25,000 words, which is about 120 pages, 115, 120 pages of a book. So it's a novella. It's like a short novel. I did that in 5 days writing with him. But typically I like to finish off a project and then go back and rewrite it. And so when I come out of a marathon, I typically have a completely polished, finished book ready for the editor. He does his pass on it. I've had the same editor since I started. His name is Sean Ferrari. He's a fucking magician with my stuff. He runs through it. He makes the changes that he thinks the manuscript needs, and then he gives it back to me, and I give it one final pass, and then it comes out. Then we buy the cover art, and we get the promotion going, and we put it out. And my last book that I finished a book that's coming out next year called Beetle Brain, about a stripper that eats a magic beetle and gains control over a giant beetle population that burrows up from the center of the earth. And she's a terrible person. She's just an awful human being, so every decision she makes in the book is bad. So from chapter to chapter to chapter, things just get worse and worse and worse for her. And, of course, she blames everyone else around her. Everybody but herself is at fault, even though it's her awful decisions that get her there. I just had this – I wanted to write a book from the perspective of an awful person. Most books are written from the perspective of the heroes, or sometimes there's a balance. You get some hero chapters, some villain chapters. And I wanted to write a book from the perspective of a terrible person. Nobody's ever terrible. We yell at movies and tell people they have to act perfect and they have to make the right decisions and they can't be dumb. Don't open that door, stupid. I would never do that. I wanted to write a whole book about things that people would never do. I wanted to write a character. Everybody has that character. Everybody knows that hot mess, that train wreck in their life that just they just trip over. They can't get on the right track to spite themselves. They just make horrible life choices and blame everyone else around them, even though every day they make these terrible fucking decisions. So I gave the whole world over to a terrible stripper named Sue Ellen, who was going to do this, who's going to act like that. And so it was super fun. And I actually wrote that all in I didn't do any marathon on Beetle Brain. I wrote that in 1,000 and 2,000 word chunks every day, and I Snapchatted the whole process. And I just finished that book about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I finished the first pass on that. So it varies. Sometimes I always write daily, and then sometimes I book marathons, and so a marathon write.
What are some of the frustrations that you run into when trying to write a novel? Like writer's block or trying to make a story whole?
Well, I never have writer's block. I think writer's block is a fallacy. I don't think it actually exists. You get writer's frustration. Writer's block is just sort of getting to a point in your story where you're unsure of where you should go next, or unsure of whether what you wrote before is the right thing. Writer's block, people think writer's block has been like popularized on TV and in movies as someone sitting in front of a blank white page and not knowing what to write. That doesn't really happen. Everybody knows what they're going to write next. Everybody has a bunch of ideas. Everybody knows what they're going to write next. The problem is we get the insecurity of writers is rampant. Writers are the most insecure people on the fucking planet, and they always think the last sentence they wrote is the worst sentence they've ever written in their lives. And so what writer's block is it's you get in your own way. You get in your own way, and you second-guess your decisions, you second-guess your characters, you try to rewrite your thing until you just get to the point where you're so frustrated, you've rewritten this thing 8 different ways, and you don't know what to write next. You literally lock yourself up. Writer's block is just being like, fuck, I've tried every way I can think of, and none of it's right. But the reason I say it doesn't exist is that's an attitude. That's an attitude. And to me, when I write a book, when I write a story, I have a roadmap. I write a small outline that it's not set in stone at all. What I do is I give myself a map. I say, okay, here's where I want to end. This is the ending, and this is the beginning. And how I get there is anybody's guess. So the map just tells me where things are. It doesn't tell me how to get there. So each chapter, each different spot in the book, I have the freedom to go wherever I want to with it. And here's the trick. The difference between writer's block, a writer who has writer's block and a writer who doesn't, is the writer who doesn't is fearless. The writer who doesn't consider the last sentence they wrote until the next sentence is written. And a writer that doesn't suffer writer's block just continues to write sentence after sentence after sentence until the book's done, and then they let it sit for a while. They come back to it, and generally when you let a project sit and come back to it, you don't find things, because it's already whole. You put all the puzzles together. All the puzzles are in place. The puzzle pieces are in place. You've got a completed puzzle that's not quite locked together yet, but you know where all the pieces are. You've turned all the pieces over on your puzzle, and they're all in their place where they're supposed to go. And the second draft is locking each piece into place and then deciding, like, well, that piece doesn't necessarily go there. That's not the kind of piece that I want. I'm going to replace it with another piece. It's so easy to replace, and it's way easier to replace individual pieces of a story than it is to just than it is to try to rewrite something when you don't even know where the rest of it. Imagine having a quarter of a puzzle constructed and then just continuously saying this piece doesn't go there. No, this piece goes here. No, this piece goes here in the same spot over and over and over again. There's no way to know what piece goes there because you haven't built out the rest of the puzzle yet. Mm-hmm. So the way to avoid writer's block is to never look back. Never look back until you're done. And then when you go through your second draft, you fix your mistakes. But they're so easy to fix in the second draft. It's already when you have a first draft that's finished because you're fixing individual little pieces when you know what happens next.
Okay.
So that's how I do it. And people say, yeah, but how do you know what you write is good? Well, there's only one way to know what good writing is, and that's by reading. And like I said, I've spent my life reading. My first book I read in third grade was a choose-your-own-adventure time travel dinosaur book. And I've never stopped reading since. And I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. And you start to learn. The more you read, the more you start to figure out, well, this has been done over and over and over again. You start to see the tropes, and you start to see these things that these ideas that have been explored to death, and you see the different ways people have described certain things over and over and over again, and you start to learn what really good writing is. You run into a writer like Clive Barker, you run into a novella like The Hellbound Heart that became the Hellraiser movie, and you're able, if you read enough, you're able to hit that and go, oh shit, this is something special. He's writing this in a way, from a perspective, and with language that I've never seen before. That's how you know. And so when you become a writer, you have to write like that. You already know what good writing is because you've read it. You've read enough writing to know what it looks like. So then you start writing it. And there's a dude named Ira Glass who runs a show called This American Life on NPR. And if you look up Ira Glass or writing or some, I don't know what keyword you'd have to look up, Ira Glass inspirational writing speech or something like that, he talks about how among his group of friends, it took him the longest to get good at his job, and he's a journalist. It took him the longest to get good at his job, and he watched people get great all around him, and he was only okay. And he said that the only way he was able to get great at his job was to experience, was to follow the greatness of his peers, and was to try harder, try over and over and over again, until he got better. And we talked about this, this earlier in this conversation. We talked about the millennial generation refusing to fail. You sort of have to. If you're ever going to be good at something, if you're ever going to be a good writer, if you're ever going to get to the point where you don't second guess every sentence you write, you have to get there by writing a bunch of crap first. You have to get there by so you read enough to know what good writing is, and then you have to write enough to get there. You write your first book and your first several dozen short stories, and they're not good enough. They can't be. You can't. You're not a prodigy. You're not a genius. You're not going to be a fucking fantastic writer in the first foot out of the race. You know what I mean? First step out of the race. So you just have to keep doing it, and you have to get to the point where you recognize that what you do is quality because you know what quality looks like. And it's kind of like, you can't become a great chef until you know what good food tastes like, right? You have to eat all the fucking food. You have to eat all the food till you know what things taste like, and then you can cook and you can taste your food, and you can say, a 5-star chef at a restaurant doesn't get that way without eating everybody else's fucking food. And the same holds true for writing. So that's my rant on writer's block. When people tell me about writer's block, I say, fuck off, go read all the books in the world. You'll never have writer's block again. I have right now, I'm staring, like literally as we have this conversation, I'm staring at a whiteboard on my wall that has 15 novels written on it that I need to write. I never run out of ideas. Writer's block is just not something that exists in my world. I'm really utilitarian. I was raised by blue collar parents. You know, my dad's a fucking welder. He gets up in the morning and he goes to fucking work and he works his ass off all day. And that's what I do. I get up and I go write, and I write my 2,000 words, rain or shine. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter. Is the muse striking me today? Fuck the muse. I got 2,000 words to write. And I've read enough books to know what 2,000 good words look like, so they damn well better be good words.
Yeah. What particular passage or particular book that you've written are you extremely proud of? That you look at this and like, this is what I am all about.
Well, I had mentioned Vampire Guts earlier. I think that still to this day, that is the one that really stands out to me as far as a novel-length work that really represents everything that I stand for as a writer. Guts as a character is very much like Luke Cage in the new Marvel show, except Luke Cage sucks because he's sort of this whiny, apathetic character who's like worried that he's going to go back to jail even though he breaks out of jail 10 seconds after he gets superpowers. There's like no jail in the world that can hold him because he's got fucking super strength, but he refuses to act with his super strength because he doesn't want to go to jail. Well, Gus is a character who seemingly has unlimited powers and struggles with that. He struggles with this God complex that his will alone could destroy the planet. That's how powerful he is, and he has to kind of live with that. And so I really like the character, and I kind of consider Guts my Conan, in that there will be a bunch of Guts stories. Vampire Guts in Nuketown is only the first in what will be many Guts stories if I live long enough to tell them. Because I think that there's so much that can be explored with a character like that, a character with unlimited power, but a character who he doesn't want to rule the planet. He has no desire to be a leader at all. He just wants to be left alone. So what do you do when all the vampires in the world are after you, and all you want to do is be left alone, but you have the power to kill every single one of them, and you have the power to destroy everything on the planet. And I think there's a lot of stories that can be told from that character. So that's probably the book and the character that I like the most in all of my fiction.
All right. As far as, since self-publishing has become such a bigger world and has allowed people to get their ideas out there without having to go through the agonizing rejection process of the big house publishers, what are your words of wisdom for upcoming writers or people that are thinking about getting into self-publishing as far as how to get started?
It's a cliche, but I after so many years doing it, I have the same opinion. My only advice to aspiring writers is to find any other career in the world to do other than writing. Get away from it before you get trapped like the rest of us. It's not fun. It's not lucrative. You're not going to make any money. It's full of egotistical people who will stab you in the back and try to ruin your career and reputation in order to, in their mind, gain better standing for themselves. It's a small pond that's full, and everybody in that pond believes that if they eliminate everyone else from the pond, that they'll be the big fish. It's really terrible that way. But if you are compelled, if everything I just said, you'll never make any money, people will attack you and your reputation. It's hard to sell anything. So you sit for long hours in the dark and write these books and sell very few copies of them. It's very demoralizing. It's very disheartening. But if all that doesn't scare you away, if years and years and years of abject poverty and obscurity doesn't scare you away, if you are still compelled to write, if you're still compelled to tell stories, and there's no other way for you to do that than write books, because my real advice is get into video game publishing. Video games are where you make money. If you want to make money, go write video games. Go get involved in that. That industry is like a $5 billion a year industry. Motherfuckers are paying $60 for a game, $30 for access to the game, $5 per upgrade for the game, and motherfuckers are paying it. That's where your money is. You really want to make money as a creative person, go get into fucking video games. But if you are compelled to write fiction, if that's what you have to do with your life because there's just nothing else you could possibly do, then do what I just said earlier. You read all the books. Look up lists of books. What are the best horror books? What are the best science fiction books? What are the best romance books? What are the best, literary fiction books? What are the best Lovecraftian books? What are the best Bizarro books? Find them, buy them, read them all. Read every single fucking one of them, deconstruct them. One of my favorite authors, Brian Keene, he talks openly about how when he started writing fiction, he actually took Stephen King's novella The Mist and typed it out so that he could learn how Stephen King wrote. He literally physically deconstructed a book by typing it out himself to figure out what it felt like to write a book. So that's what I suggest people do, because most people aren't willing to do that kind of work, and they just, like you said, self-publishing is prevalent, super easy, doesn't cost anything. So a lot of people just write a thing and then throw it up on the internet, and it gives everybody else a bad fucking reputation. And they say, oh, Kevin Strange is self-published. That means he's an amateur. That means there's a bunch of grammatical mistakes, and he's an amateur, and he's been rejected from every publishing house. The people who give us that reputation are people that don't work hard. You still have to work hard. Writing is not a lazy man's job by any manner of means. You have to do a lot of reading. You have to do a lot of writing. I encourage you to find an editor you trust, find an editor you get along with. Not the first guy. We go after editors like we go after fucking dates at prom. We just throw it like a fucking college freshman just trying to fuck everything that moves at a fucking frat party. You can't just take the first editor you find. You have to find an editor who loves the same fiction you write, that's going to be excited. My editor, Sean, is excited when I send him a manuscript because he loves what I write. He loves to read the type of fiction I write, so every new story he gets from me to edit is a treat for him. And he'll send me passages and be like, this is fucking funny, or this is fucking awesome. As he's editing it, I'm getting these emails from him telling me how cool these different passages are. Find an editor like that, and it ain't going to be the first editor you find, and it ain't going to be the cheapest editor that you find or the fastest editor that you find, but it's got to be the right one. And never let that editor go. Work with that editor like they're your partner. That's the invisible co-writer of your book. That's the person that's going to check you when you do something stupid, and the person that's going to save your ass when you do something dumb. And they're going to help you shape your book and it's to make it great. And don't, I don't know. It's self-publishing is so easy. It's so easy to slap a crappy cover on your book, but that's not going to catch anybody's attention. And sitting on social media and spamming a link to buy a book over and over again, nobody's paying attention to that. It's not MySpace anymore. You remember on MySpace, in the MySpace days when bands would just spam the fuck out of people? I think bands ruined MySpace. The band spam is what drove people to Facebook. I really honestly believe that.
Although when Timberlake took it over, it became a band forum, and now I don't even know if it's still up.
I don't know. Good luck with that. Bandcamp seems to be the place where all the musicians find real success. I don't think MySpace has overtaken that thing. But anyway, that's the advice I have for aspiring writers.
I think that pretty much covers everything. I don't think we've gone beyond even the subjects we thought we were going to talk about. So I think we'll wrap it up by letting you do your plugging, then let all the listeners know where to find you, where to find your books, anything you want to put out there, you are more than welcome to. So take it away.
Well, I think I did a lot of that already in this conversation, but yeah, come find me at kevinstrange.com. There's brand new content that goes up every week. I do my favorite cult movie lists. I do a review. I'm getting ready to put up a Luke Cage review. I don't know when this is going to air, but it'll probably be pretty soon. So, Luke Cage just came out last weekend. I publish short fiction that you can read of mine, free short fiction. I'm actually serializing that Vampire Guts book we've been talking about. I'm serializing that novel. One chapter a month comes out, and the first chapter is already up. Second chapter comes out next month or later this month, I think, like late October. The second chapter comes out, and so over the course of 14 months, I'm gonna serialize the entire thing. I do audiobooks. I have an audiobook podcast that's getting ready to start again called Reading to Strangers, where I'll serialize a story or a chapter of a book. If you don't like reading, but you do like listening to audio stuff or like listening to podcasts in your car and whatnot, you can listen to my stuff there. That'll be every Sunday, called Reading to Monsters. It's not quite up yet, but it'll be up pretty soon, so I can plug it now. Social media, Kevin Strange on everything. Kevin Strange on Facebook, Kevin the Strange on Twitter, Kevin the Strange on Instagram and on Snapchat. I mainly use Facebook and Snapchat, but I hate Facebook. Don't add me. I probably won't add you back because I'm going to assume you're a social justice warrior who's going to attack me in the comments about the egalitarian views I hold because they're not your own. You're going to call me a sexist and a bigot and a racist because I don't adhere to your crazy totalitarian ideology, even though I love everyone equally. So don't follow me on Facebook. Just follow me on Snapchat. On Snapchat, like I said, I post my daily workout there. When I go, like when I went to Brian Keene's house and did his podcast a couple weeks ago, I did a 19-hour trip up to Chicago and over to Pennsylvania, and I Snapchatted the whole thing. Next weekend is my birthday weekend, and I'm going to be Snapchatting a crazy debaucherous trip to Bloomington, Indiana, to a strip club that my friends own. We're going to have a crazy party there. I'll be Snapchatting the whole thing, so follow me for that. That's not all I have. My new book, All the Toxic Waste from My Heart, 14 short stories, just came out. You can buy that on Amazon, or you can go to my Strange store at kevinthestrange.com, and you have the choice to either buy stuff from Amazon, that's Amazon Kindle or paperback, or you can buy from my Square store. That's like PayPal but better. And basically you can buy stuff that's signed and personalized by me. And there'll be exclusive mini chapbooks that I put out a few times a year. I'm getting ready to put out my first one. That'll be this Halloween story. It's going to be signed and personalized, and you can only get it from the Square store. You won't be able to get that from Amazon. So yeah, that's where you get my shit.
All right, Kevin. Thank you very much for taking these hours to sit down to talk with me about this stuff. I thank you very much, and I wish you the best. And this will be up very soon. Wait, if you're already listening to it, then it is up. So fuck you. So, all right, Kevin. Thank you very much again, and I wish you the best. And I look forward to seeing what you put out.
Oh yeah, man. Thanks for doing this with me, and definitely stay safe during this hurricane, and don't get blown away before you put this up.
Yeah. All right, man. You have yourself a good night.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.